1958, White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. At the luxurious Greenbrier Resort, construction crews are building a new wing. Bulldozers dig deep. Concrete is poured. But what guests and most employees don't know is that beneath all that elegance, workers are secretly building something else entirely. A massive underground bunker designed to house all 535 members of Congress in case of nuclear war.
Over 30 years, this facility remained operational, fully stocked, and completely hidden. Maintenance workers posed as TV repairmen. Blast doors weighing 25 tons sat behind decorative wallpaper, and an entire small town kept the secret. This is Project Greek Island, one of the most successful classified operations of the Cold War. It's the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union has nuclear weapons. America has nuclear
weapons. Everyone's terrified World War III could start at any moment. Kids are doing duck and cover drills. Families are building bomb shelters. The government is planning for the worst. And one of the biggest concerns, if Washington, D.C. gets hit by a nuclear bomb, what happens to Congress? How do you keep the legislative branch functioning if the Capitol is radioactive rubble? President Eisenhower understood the importance of continuity of government. He'd seen what happened when command structures broke down during war. So in the late 1950s, his administration started looking for a solution. They needed a place close enough to Washington to reach quickly, but far enough away to avoid being a primary target. It had to be discreet, secure, and large enough to house over 500 people for weeks
or months, and it had to stay completely secret. The answer was the Greenbrier Resort. The Greenbrier had history with the government. During World War II, it had been a military hospital. It was owned by the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, which had close ties to federal operations. The location was about 250 miles from Washington, and crucially, the resort already had a reason. Adding a new wing wouldn't raise suspicions. Perfect cover. In 1958, construction began on what the public thought was simply the West Virginia wing. But deep underground, workers were building something extraordinary. The bunker complex ended up being over 112,000 square feet. That's more than 2.5 acres of underground space carved into the mountainside. It had everything Congress would need during a nuclear crisis. A full House chamber with seating for 470, a Senate chamber for 100, dormitories with bunk beds for over 1,000 people, because you'd need staff, doctors, cooks, and security, not just lawmakers. A power plant, a water purification system, a cafeteria, a clinic with operating rooms, and a decontamination area where people arriving from surface could be checked for radiation. The entrance was hidden in plain sight. The blast doors, massive things weighing 25 tons and 19 inches thick, were disguised as walls in the hotel's exhibition hall. Guests walked past them constantly, with no idea that behind the decorative wallpaper were doors designed to withstand shockwave and radiation from a nuclear explosion. Not a direct hit, the bunker was designed as a fallout shelter, not a bomb-proof fortress, but it could protect people from radiation that would follow an attack on Washington. Maintaining this facility required constant work. Technology had to be updated, supplies rotated, equipment tested. But how do you maintain a secret bunker under a busy hotel without anyone noticing? Enter Forsyth Associates, a fake company that supposedly specialized in TV repair. The Greenbrier had hundreds of televisions, so having maintenance staff on site made perfect sense. But in reality, Forsyth Associates employees were government contractors with top-secret clearances. Their real job was keeping the bunker operational 24 hours a day. These maintenance workers lived in the community. They had families, went to church, shopped at local stores. And everyone in White Sulphur Springs kind of knew something was up. The locals weren't stupid. Construction of that size, government contractors coming and going, security that seemed too tight for a hotel expansion. People talked about it quietly. But they understood this mysterious government project was putting food on their tables and supporting their economy. So they didn't ask too many questions, and they definitely didn't talk to outsiders. The bunker was kept fully stocked: food, clothing, medical supplies, office equipment. Everything needed to run a government in exile. Communication systems were constantly updated. In the early days, analog phone systems. By the 80s and 90s, computer networks and satellite communications. All phone calls from the bunker were routed through the hotel's switchboard, so it would just look like normal hotel traffic. Here's the wild part. Most members of Congress didn't even know the bunker existed. Only the
House and Senate leadership were briefed. The representatives and senators who would actually be evacuated there had no idea where they'd be going. The entire operation was classified at the highest levels. The official designation was U.S. Government Relocation Facility. The code name was Project Greek Island. The facility was never activated, not during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 when the world came closest to nuclear war, not during any tense standoffs throughout the Cold War. It just sat there, maintained and ready, year after year, decade after decade. By the 1980s, the bunker was becoming obsolete. Intercontinental ballistic missiles could reach their targets in 30 minutes. Submarine-launched missiles were even faster. The idea that you could evacuate all of Congress from Washington to West Virginia before missiles arrived was increasingly unrealistic, but the facility stayed operational anyway. And then in May 1992, everything changed. Washington Post reporter Ted Gupp published an article exposing the bunker's existence. The headline was "The Last Resort." Gupp had been tipped off by an anonymous source who was concerned about taxpayer money being spent on an outdated facility in the post-Cold War era. The article revealed everything: the location, the purpose, the fake company, the whole operation. The reaction was immediate. Some praised the government for having contingency plans. Others were furious that Congress had a secret escape plan while ordinary citizens would be left to face nuclear war without protection. Why should lawmakers get special treatment? The bunker's effectiveness relied entirely on secrecy, so once the Washington Post story broke, it was useless. Within months, the government decommissioned the facility. In 1995, the resort opened the bunker for tours. The first people to tour it were Greenbrier employees who'd spent decades keeping the secret. Today, you can take a 90-minute tour through the facility. Most original equipment was removed, but the resort has furnished it with period-appropriate items to show what it looked like during the Cold War. You walk through those 25-ton blast doors, see the congressional chambers, the dormitories, the power plant, the decontamination area. It's like stepping into a time capsule of Cold War paranoia. The bunker's story raises fascinating questions about government secrecy, preparedness, and the ethics of selective survival. Was it right for Congress to have an escape plan when millions of Americans didn't? Was the bunker a wise investment in national continuity, or a wasteful project? And how did an entire community keep such a massive secret for over 3 decades? Part of the answer is that the late 50s and early 60s were a different time. The Cold War made people genuinely fearful of nuclear annihilation. Civil defense programs were everywhere. Building shelters and planning for nuclear war wasn't seen as paranoid, it was seen as responsible. The culture valued secrecy and loyalty in ways that seem almost unimaginable today. People understood that loose talk could endanger national security. And in a small town like White Sulphur Springs, where everyone knew everyone, there was social pressure to keep quiet. There's also the economic factor. The Greenbrier was a major employer. The bunker project brought federal money into the area. People had jobs because of this facility. Talking about it could jeopardize all of that. So families would discuss it privately, but they wouldn't breathe a word to journalists or outsiders. The Greenbrier bunker stands as a remarkable achievement in both engineering and operational security. Think about what it took to build a facility that size under a functioning hotel without the general public figuring it out. Think about maintaining it for over 30 years, keeping it stocked and operational, updating the technology, all while preserving the secret. And think about the trust required between the government and a private resort, and between the resort and its community. Today, the bunker is a popular tourist attraction. It's been featured on NBC, the History Channel, and Discovery Channel. The Greenbrier markets it as a unique piece of Cold War history, which it absolutely is. Some original maintenance workers, now elderly, work as tour guides, sharing stories about maintaining this facility in complete secrecy. The bunker also raises questions about current government continuity plans. Does something like Project Greek Island still exist? Almost certainly. The need to protect government leadership in case of catastrophic attack hasn't gone away. In fact, with terrorism, cyber attacks, and other modern threats, it's arguably more
Important than ever. But those facilities aren't in West Virginia anymore, and we probably won't know where they are until they're declassified decades from now. The story of the Greenbrier bunker is ultimately about Cold War America at its most paranoid and most prepared. It's about what happens when a nation genuinely believes it might face nuclear apocalypse. It's about the extraordinary lengths governments will go to.
ensure continuity, and the ordinary people who keep extraordinary secrets. And it's a reminder that beneath the surface of normal life, there are often hidden worlds that most of us never imagine. For over 30 years, hundreds of people went to work every day maintaining a facility that could house Congress during nuclear war, and almost nobody knew. That's the real story of Project Greek Island. Not